Iguodala to Curry, back to Iguodala, up for the layup. Oh, blocked by James. It's over. It's over. Cleveland is a city of champions once again. The Cavaliers are NBA champions.
That sound means it's time for Cavs on the Break NBA podcast, part of the Press Play Podcast Network. I'm your host, Chase Smith, and with me, he covers your Cleveland Cavaliers for Sports Illustrated and Sam that never gets old, the one, the only Sam Amico. Sam, what's going on, my man?
Oh, not a whole lot. You know, I feel like, Chase, that I'm working as much as I would during a regular season or lottery or draft coverage. I'm probably even a little bit more, but I'm happy to be here nonetheless.
Good. And I know we are grateful for the work. You know, some people aren't as lucky or, have that opportunity. So I'm glad you're working, Sam. It's a better place when you're working and you're putting your content out there. Hey, I want to talk about a couple of things. I want to talk about the GM Summit meeting that took place today, May 28th. We'll talk about the NBA's plan to bring him back and touch on the draft. Sam, so today the GMs met, however they did, virtually whatever, on someone's yacht. I don't know how they did this. And here's what they came out with, Sam. 50%, and this has to do with what to do with this, the rest of the NBA season and the playoffs moving ahead. 50% of the GMs voted to go straight to the playoffs and cancel the rest of the season. So half of them. Over half of them voted to reseed the playoffs 1 through 16 without conferences, which is really intriguing. And then 75% of those teams voted for a play-in tournament for the playoffs, to which a quarter of them, 25%, voted for a group stage. Sam, does this surprise you at all? They're looking to go this direction?
No, I think that there's a lot of, as you can see from this poll right here, there's a lot of different opinions and variables that if they do start playing, we saw the NHL, if you saw that, how they went straight to they're deciding to go straight to the playoffs. So it wouldn't be a big surprise. The one thing that does surprise me a little bit about the NBA is that I think that you would want some form of a warm-up game before you start the playoffs. I don't know how you would go about getting that. If you're going to cancel the regular season, everybody's going to be in the same boat if you do start. So none of those are surprising to me at all. I think, like you said, it's interesting if they were to do a 1 through 16 playoff format, simply because you work so hard to be the leader in your conference, and really your record might be different. For instance, if the Philadelphia 76ers played in the Western Conference, the record might be different. I'm not saying it's going to be worse, but it would probably be different. And that stands for every team in the East and West, vice versa. So it's almost like you're just saying, you know what? The regular season really didn't mean a whole lot until this point. We're just going to try to get something accomplished here and crown a champion.
With the 1 through 16 seeding, this is kind of where we're at. At the bottom of the East, we have the Nets and the Magic at 7 and 8 with 30 wins. The Nets are in 7th with 30 wins and 34 losses. In the West, the 7th seeded the Mavericks with 40 wins and the Grizzlies with 32. So it looks like the Grizzlies with that 8 seed, and then it would be it would be those seeds. I thought that they would be more because the Trailblazers would be out because they had 29 wins. I'm just looking here on the standings. So the Trailblazers would be out. I mean, they'd be out anyway, but they wouldn't really have a chance to get it. So you're thinking about the play-in tournament. If they do like the first 10 seeds are in, but then there's a play-in for the last kind of 2 seeds with 4-6 teams, kind of like the March Madness does with the last couple seeds there.
Right.
I mean, talk about ratings bonanza, Sam. Oh my goodness, people, they're already starving for something, and you just give them anything like that resembles the March Madness tournament. Dude, I can just imagine the brackets, the betting, the all the sick days you're going to take off just to binge watch basketball for 4 or 5 days. It's going to be insane.
Yeah, and you know what? Let's start there. Let's start with the play-in tournament. My guess is if you're just going to seed the playoffs 1 through 16, regardless of conference, then you're not going to invite teams in the East for that play-in tournament. You're going to have those 4 teams in the West: Portland, San Antonio, Sacramento, and New Orleans, because those are the teams with the next 4 best records.
I mean, heck, even the Suns have a better record than the Wizards.
Right. So, the Wizards are out. You've got your 8 in the East, let's say. Yeah. Okay, you got those first 8 in the East, and then your next 12 are all in the Western Conference, and then maybe you have, I don't know how you work that out to get that 8th. What would in effect be the 16th seed or 15th seed? You'd play for the 15th seed, I believe, because Orlando probably has the worst record. They'd be 16, but you would play for that 15th and 14th seed. And I don't know how you go about that, but I think that those 4 teams that I just listed that currently aren't in the playoff picture would be the 4 that would give you 20 to make up that field.
So those 4 teams are the Portland Trailblazers, the New Orleans Pelicans, the Sacramento Kings, San Antonio Spurs. That would just be delicious. That would be amazing. And you think, the Pelicans were playing great ball. Zion really coming into his own. The Trailblazers were kind of underachieving. But a lot of intriguing kind of storylines there. Sam, what would be your preferred way of how this shakes out the playoffs? Do you like to keep the standard format, or do you like the 1 through 16? Do you like the group stage? What do you think about?
I think the group stage is a little confusing for the average fan. I think for diehards, that's great, but I think it might be a little too much for the average fan to take in. I do like the 1 through 16 with the play-in tournament. I do like that idea. I don't really see how you could have. I don't see how you could break it down into East and West at this point, just because you just haven't played enough games. There's too many records that are off balance, and I think you just need to seed them 1 through 16, even though it kind of makes the regular season meaningless. But at this point, that's okay. And then get those 4 teams from the West that you just listed, and have them somehow involved, and take it from there. Because I agree. I think that people will love it. I just think there's so much. People are starving for some live sports, and gamblers are starving for something to bet on. And
Sam, I saw a tweet. There was a group of guys. They were at the end of a street, and they were betting on what color car was going to drive by next.
You know what? Yeah, like I said, that's they could change that to the New Orleans Pelicans against the Portland Trailblazers, so. Or
they can keep doing it if they found something that works.
Hey, whatever works, right? Exactly. They could bet on how long this podcast is going to go. Yeah. But I think that'd be cool, if they just did it that way, and. It would give you some intriguing first round matchups that you would never otherwise see.
Never, yeah.
Man. And it would just bring a whole new element to it. And again, keep in mind that you're talking about a situation now where no one has home court advantage, right? Because everybody's playing in the Walt Disney World Resort Auxiliary Gym with no fans.
How funny would it be if the Raptors got lined up with the Lakers in like the semifinals, and the Browns stopped them again from going to the finals?
Yeah, that would be pretty not fun for Raptors fans. But
oh my gosh, that would be so. If like the Raptors are like, finally he's out of the, like, oh my gosh. I mean, no, they won last year, but just an unexpected LeBron roadblock. And
right, and I mean, not to disrespect anybody like the Bucks, who have been great. But I mean, think about it. Your finals in a scenario like that could be somebody like the Lakers versus the Clippers. And, or let's say they get knocked out somehow. It could be somebody like Milwaukee versus Boston. In other words, it wouldn't have to be 2 teams. It could be 2 teams from the same conference playing in the finals. Although my guess is they would try to keep it as true as possible to an East-West type of thing.
Yeah. I don't know if I've shared my thoughts on Coach Bud on the pod. I might have before. I'm not really high on Coach Bud. I don't know. But very, very exciting. So let's go back. So 50% of the GMs voted to go straight to the playoffs and cancel the rest of the season. Who are the 50% of the teams that didn't vote to go straight to the playoffs, Sam? In your mind, project what teams would like, no, let's play some games before we get to the playoffs.
Well, I have a hard time wondering who those teams might be or speculating on who they might be, the general managers, other than, again, maybe these are teams that are in the playoffs that want to get a couple warm-up games and a couple of runs in before they start the real thing.
Or some teams that are like, let's improve our draft stock, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It goes both ways a little bit.
Well, and I was just shooting the breeze with a GM the other day, Chase, and I'll say this: he's a GM of a playoff team, but we were just talking, and he said, it might be kind of cool if they had a tournament for the non-playoff teams to determine the order of the draft, which they're never going to do that because the lottery is too big of a moneymaker. But that might be something, or to seed the lottery to give those guys the teams, the teams like the Cleveland Cavaliers. But I think at this point, Chase, they're looking at it like the less people we have there, probably the better. So I think, and Chase, thinking about that, let's say that's what they decide, we may not see the Cavaliers play again until December. If they don't play in Orlando, let's assume they're going to Orlando and they don't play there and they go straight to the playoffs. These non-playoff teams are probably looking at, Christmas Day, a couple days after Christmas before they even play another game.
Right when the Cavs had it figured out, man.
well, yeah. And now, you know what, you're going to have some free agency. You're going to have a draft before the next season picks up, and what else you're going to have? I can almost guarantee it is you're going to have some collective bargaining between the Players Association and the league, because there's something in the contract, in the current collective bargaining agreement, that says in that contract we can sit back down and renegotiate if these certain events happen, and one of them is a pandemic. And that's what we're experiencing. And I assure you that with the salary cap going down now, there's going to be some collective bargaining before next season resumes.
Let's hope it doesn't go to a strike, because that's worst case scenario for everybody, man.
Strike or a lockout, or even a struggle like baseball's having right now. You don't want any of that stuff.
Yeah, we'll have a full-out free agent draft show coming up the next couple weeks or month, whenever we get to it, Sam. I don't know. But, yeah,
no rush.
Voted to go straight to the playoffs and cancel the season. I'm with you, man. I think some of the teams want some games before the playoffs. Some of the teams wanted to maybe improve their draft stock. Some teams are like, no, we like where we're at. Let's just roll into it. Let's not injure anyone else. Let's just go and wrap this up. Let's limit exposure. So I think there's a whole lot of, like you said, variables and avenues that can go with that. The 1 through 16 no conference seeding, man, that's just like you have a bunch of – the NBA is broken up, I feel like, into a couple camps. One, you have like the old school basketball is basketball. Who needs advanced analytics? Let's not worry about numbers. Let's go out there and let's just play ball. And then you have this other group that are like, no one should ever shoot a jump shot. No one should ever – you have these two different camps where they're completely owned and ran by advanced analytics and stats, and another group like, no, that's all bogus. I feel like the advanced analytics stats culture would love this 1 through 16. Like, let's just get them all there and figure it out. Like, I think that's a really interesting way, and it seemed to be pretty popular among the GMs. Over half voted to reseed the playoffs without conferences, and you start looking at some of these matchups. Man, can you imagine LA versus LA? Or, even the LeBron, Toronto, or Clippers, Raptors, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Some of these storied, narratives that we would all love to see, and you get really, really excited. And all of a sudden the NBA is back and they're right at the top, and it'd be amazing.
It's going to be real interesting to see, to me, what it's like to watch these games with no fans. How do you go about that? What's it going to sound like? What's it's going to be it'll be as quiet probably as watching summer league games. You know how that goes, but given everything, it would be such a great blessing for sports fans if this were to actually happen, and they'd be able to pull this off, because it'd be something really cool to watch. And guess what, Chase? There would be games on all day, every day. They would run these games at the same time. They would, it'd be like the NCAA tournament over the summer until probably Labor Day or a little after.
Talk about the drop in economy, man.
Right.
I think people just wouldn't work, and I know it's not that big, but I'd be hard to get stuff done, man. That's for sure. I would assume, and I know some players mentioned that they didn't want piped in sound. They would have to pipe in something to cover the trash talk on the field. I mean, heck, if it's quiet, if no one's in, you could hear people during timeout.
They have summer league games, right? So, and when you see those summer league games, you're not hearing what's going on the court or the coaches or anything. They turn the mics way down. They don't have the rims and stuff mic'd like they do during regular NBA games, so that you can hear free throws. So they'd be able to pull it off, I'm sure.
Great. Well, I for one can't wait. I know we talked. I don't know if we just text or whatever. Disney is still kind of like the tentative ideal landing spot for all of this dream scenario.
Yeah, right now, it looks and sounds like Walt Disney's going to be the place. For a while, we were hearing Walt Disney in Las Vegas, and the gyms in Vegas are already rented out for Summer League. They rented them out before all this happened, so which is a little surprising to me that they're not going to go to Vegas, but because that's already paid for. Now, I think maybe some of the stuff in Orlando has already been paid for too, because they also have a summer league there, but that's neither here nor there, because they're not going to be able to come back in the time when summer league normally would be, which is the start of July. If the NBA does resume, it's going to be the middle or late July after any of those gyms have been rented. So,
the thought behind Disney is the thought behind Disney is they have the accommodations to host them and their families. They have the wait staff. They have the restaurants. They have the capacity to host the media and all that stuff. Like, they have already all that there, pretty much contained already in its own little quarantine world, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's off from the rest of Walt Disney. It literally is truly its own little athletic area, and it would make perfect sense.
I'm glad some of those, richer players get a chance to spend some time in Disney by themselves privately. I think that's just something that people who make more money than everybody else, good for them. They need a break every now and then too, Sam. So it's
sure do.
Yeah. Well, hey, let's continue to narrow in the NBA's plan as they continue to bring teams back in place. They look to have this release. We were talking before the show next week. Sam, do you want to shed light on that a little bit?
Well, I think that they want to, on Friday, they had the GM call on Thursday. On Friday, they're going to have the same type of call with the team owners. And, I heard the Milwaukee Bucks owner on CNBC, co-owner Mark Lassery, saying that he feels like they will put it to vote, these type of votes, if not tomorrow, if not Friday, I should say, then early next week. And they'll put all their heads together, and I'm sure they'll probably, my guess is, have a similar call with players' representatives and the players' union, and say, here's what we're thinking, and here's what we want to do, and let's get to it. So once they decide that, the next step is going to be, okay, here are the guidelines for having a full practice, running people back into, bringing people back into the city, to their home markets, the full roster, the coaches. Right now, Chase, 23 or 24 of the practice facilities have been reopened, but those are very limited voluntary workouts of 4 players at a time. The head coaches aren't allowed to go right now. Neither are the lead assistants. But the idea is by next week, the end of next week, you have a plan that is going to say, okay, here's when we come back, and here's when, we're gonna come back. We're gonna bring all these players back into their home markets, and then you're gonna quarantine for a couple weeks, and then you're gonna start a training camp for 2 or 3 weeks before we move everybody down to Disney. So I think with the way, barring some unforeseen circumstance, next week you're going to start hearing, okay, here's the date when we're all going to start returning to our respective practice facilities and those towns anyway to quarantine. Everybody will quarantine for 14 days, and then you'll go back into start practice slowly but surely. You'll start practice and do that for a few weeks.
Essentially starting the season over again. And what the NBA doesn't want is another outbreak or, a very visible, spread quickly to teams and to their families. And so trying to avoid that, obviously that's what everyone's trying to do, but with a visible, hey, everyone's going to be watching what we do. They need this to be a perfect kind of launch here.
Well, right. I mean, Chase, God forbid a superstar, I mean, anybody, but think about a superstar testing positive. Then what do you do?
Well, I mean, we already had Gobert and at least Donovan Mitchell and others. I mean, after we relaunched and they got tested positive.
Yeah. Well, my point is if you go and you're, let's say you get down there, you're doing all your testing, they're going to have testing available, obviously. And yeah, I mean, maybe this guy's not showing any symptoms, but he tested positive for it.
Yeah.
Then you test him again. What if he tests positive again? Then all of a sudden, is that player eliminated? Is that team eliminated? Do you just cancel the whole thing? I think you got to cancel the whole thing, and I think the NBA will. I don't think they'll care. I think they'll say, you know what, safety first, and we're canceling the whole thing. We don't want anybody getting this bad or serious. We don't want any lawsuits. That's it. We tried and it didn't happen. So I think that they are very well aware that that's a possibility. And, I think that they're taking all the safety measures to avoid that. But and especially, Chase, this 2-week quarantine, when they get everybody back into their home markets, I think that they're going to feel pretty good about that, because if anybody does have any sign of it at all or test positive, even if they don't have symptoms, you're still going to have that 2-week quarantine anyway.
Yeah.
Your hope is that it's all gone by the time you get down there to Orlando, say.
Here's what I'll say, and I don't think we can say this. Well, I can't say this about every professional league in the United States. I trust Adam Silver to make the right call and to do the right thing. I don't know if I could say that about other owners or presidents or other league commissioners, but I trust Adam Silver.
Yeah. And look, they did it March 11th and said the season's suspended. Mm-hmm. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. And he will definitely he's a guy who's going to stay out in front of it. And I mean, he's got the track record to back it up. I mean, he did it in March. He'll do it in July if he has to, but hopefully, we can focus on the positive elements of it, which is this is all going to work out just fine. And there's going to be basketball in July, August, and September. And I'll suddenly become a baseball writer. The baseball writers who are always going to work on summer nights. I'll be writing about the playoff games in it, and I won't be able to be more thrilled about it. And I hope that the fans, I would think that they would be absolutely thrilled, and I hope that would mean that a lot of people who are out of work are able to return to work as well.
Yeah. Hey, before we touch on the draft and free agency, let's talk about your boy Damon Jones, Sam.
Yeah, he had some kind words to say about my work, and that's nice. It's funny, Chase, and I mentioned this in a story maybe a month ago that a nice kid wrote about me, And he said, what was it like being on television, which I still do from time to time, but then it was like every 2 or 3 times a week. And I said, one of the things, deserved or not, you almost got instant respect from the people that you were interviewing. And I remember walking down the hall one day in front of the Cavs locker room, and out comes Damon Jones, who I had never really talked to before. And he looks at me and he goes, "Sam Amico, big fan of your work." And I said, "Really? You don't hear players say that very often."
Yeah.
And he was very nice. And then he said something nice the other day on Twitter when I said, "Give us a follow." And he said, "Yeah, give Sam a follow, give Amico Hoops a follow. These guys do good stuff." And it was a really nice gesture by him.
May 24th. Get on board, Hoop fans. It's a great follow, and we'll keep you up to date on all things Hoops, capital H. It's from D19J Damon Jones on the Twitter. Damon, dude, come on, Cavs on the break. We'd love to have you on here, man.
I can almost guarantee Damon likes to talk. He's very good at that, and I'm sure he will join us at some point, and I'll hook that up for us and our listeners.
That'll be great. Hey, let's talk real quick draft and free agency. Sam, what is the latest on what they're going to do for the lottery and the draft? I know some of this is kind of tabled until they figure out the season. But any word on the moving of the draft date or what that looks like?
At some point, they're going to announce that it's been postponed. They're not going to have it before they determine what to. Even if they cancel, worst case scenario, the season's canceled. They say we can't do all this. Nobody, we can't get everybody on board. We can't do it. Season's canceled. They're still going to hold the draft in August or September. I think they're actually. Today there was a report that they may do free agency before the draft, which is the opposite of the way it normally goes, and start free agency before the draft. So I think that the draft potentially could be as late September, more realistically mid-September. And I think, we saw the NFL draft, how Roger Goodell and everybody did that virtually. I suspect that will be more of the same, that they'll do it virtually, and it's not coming until the fall. I can almost guarantee you that. They have not officially announced that they're moving it, and I've also heard that they may try to do a form of an abbreviated pre-draft combine, even if it's just for one day, where they get guys in and do measurements and do that stuff in a very, very exclusive club type of thing, and have a little pre-draft combine, even if the GMs are watching the players virtually. That might be one way to go about it.
And forgive my ignorance, because I know that decision has ripple effects to players and coaches and colleges. Have players already declared, or could they undeclare if they're like, man, I'm back on campus, I want to give this another go? You know what I mean? Like, how does that affect the players?
Well, the deadline to declare has passed. They didn't change that. So everybody who's declared is in, but they did move the withdraw date. You have a date to withdraw, and some guys have already withdrawn. That was already set at June 3rd. They pushed that back. I don't believe they've set a new date for that. They'll probably push it to sometime later in June to be able to withdraw. Most of the guys, I will say this, most of the guys who are going to stay in the draft are going to be doing so. It will probably, put it this way, the guys who aren't going to be in the draft are probably going to have to announce that they're going back to school by the end of June. I would think that would be the case, because then you got to start, you got to give these college coaches some idea of who's going to be on their team by late June.
And you think about their strategies and their recruitments and all scholars. I mean, it's just the ripple effects of this is just mind-boggling. And this is just the NBA and the basketball world
this is the least amount of players of all the major pro sports. When you're talking, you talk pro basketball, whether it be the NBA or WNBA, you talk about that. And then, but I mean, look at football and look at hockey and look at baseball, and how many players are on those rosters, are much larger than basketball. So the NBA in that sense would have it the easiest, because they have to deal with the least amount of people.
Yep. Well, Sam, I told you we'd keep this one short. We don't have a lot of things to report. We're reporting on reports of reports. When we know things, Sam will blast it out on Twitter and get it up at si.com. And then we'll talk about it here at Cavs on the Break. And so when we know anything about the playoffs, seeding, draft, all of that, guys, we're going to get up here and talk about it. Maybe get some players here in a couple of weeks, come on the show, and I think that could be some good filler time. Sam, do you have any final thoughts or anything you want to give a shout out to?
No, I just think within the next week, by this time next week, we'll have a pretty good idea of when this season is actually going to start, how they're going to go about getting people back in the arenas. And I look very much forward to writing about that and talking with you about it and to our listeners and readers.
Well, that does it for Cavs on the Break NBA podcast. Thank you all so much for downloading and listening. Make sure to give us a follow at Cavs on the Break. We always follow back. Shouts to the Press Play Podcast Network for making this possible. Follow Sam on Twitter at Amico Hoops. Get you all of his work and writings on Sports Illustrated, analysis, player quotes, interviews, insider info. Don't miss out. And Sam, I got to say, one of my favorite parts of the pod, Mike Breen. You ready, buddy?
I'm ready.
All right, Mike Breen, take us out.
Congratulations, Cleveland. Your decades-long wait is finally over. The Cavaliers are NBA champions.